the 12th day of October 2022. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. We're off and running with lots and lots of stories about the crazy nuclear industry. Nothing says crazy quite like the International Atomic Energy Agency, that's for sure. Hi everybody, and welcome. 2013, August the 6th, the Fukushima prefecture, the prefecture itself, requested that the Japanese government remove this corporation known as TEPCO from management of the multiple nuclear meltdowns. They had no right to be in that position, but it turns out the reason that they're in that position is so you don't blame the nuclear industry. Oh, you blame TEPCO. By the way, TEPCO doesn't exist. They were nationalized right away because they went bankrupt. It's no secret that the Tokyo Electric is incapable of containing the multiple nuclear meltdowns at the Fukushima Daiichi plant. Later that same month, the Japanese government criticized TEPCO's poor management of leaks. Leaks. Every time I heard the word leak in Fukushima, I just totally confused of what they could be talking about. How can you have a leak at something that doesn't exist anymore? Right? How can you have a leak when it looks like that? When you hear the word leak, that's the ultimate insult to you. Speaking of insult, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Does anybody, first off, why are they way away from the reactors? Why do they have IAEA taped on their back? What kind of in paper suits on top of that? The whole world has lost its mind. This story out of Korea today is really something. Most schools near Korea's nuclear plant lack protective gear. Most schools lack protective gear. Now, to remind you, we got a poll tonight for should TEPCO be removed because you can't solve something like a nuclear meltdown with TEPCO in charge. Why not get nuclear students or nuclear academics to do it? Should TEPCO or nuclear scientists, why not have nuclear scientists instead of TEPCO? Should TEPCO be stripped of the authority from the Fukushima nuclear meltdown site? And in 2013, they were screaming, the Fukushima prefecture government now and people, to get TEPCO out of there. Well, TEPCO can destroy everybody's life, and all I got to do is go bankrupt. It's a company. And it can't be held accountable, right? And who are you going to blame when you don't know a lot about this subject? TEPCO. Who should you be blaming? Every nuclear university on the planet, every nuclear professor on the planet, and every engineering firm on the planet that didn't step in. So, South Korea, quite the revelation today. They have 1,112 kindergarten, elementary, middle, and high schools within 20 to 30 kilometers of a nuclear power plant, folks. If you understood the emissions that are coming from power plants 24 hours a day, then you're outraged, right? If you don't, you should be, because this is madness. We can't continue to do this genocide like this. I'll explain to you what I mean in a second. Out of the schools, only 36 with 6,700 students were equipped with protective suits. They have protective suits for the students so they can evacuate in case of a nuclear accident, folks. Only 12 of the schools were equipped with a total of 2,460 protective suits for the school children. If you want to talk crazy, there's no better place than nuclear. You want to talk like, what is going on here? This can't be real. Nuclear. 12 schools got 2,400 paper suits so the kids can evacuate when they have a nuclear event. It's just so scary. All you can do is laugh, because otherwise you're going to start screaming, right? Three schools in Ulsan, though in an insufficient number, prepared evacuation suits for the students using their own budgets. They're not. Hang, bear with me. The state-run Nuclear Safety Security Commission responded to Representative Kim's findings that in a nuclear emergency, people are first advised to evacuate or take thyroid-blocking agents rather than put on a protective suit. Well, this is children. Kindergartens included. Have evacuation hazmat suits in their school in case the nuclear power plant breaks down. I can't believe that they built a school in that place. And say they built the plant after. I can't believe the schools didn't move out of the danger zone. And you'll understand how dangerous it is when we get to the end of the story. The state authority added there are no regulations in the countries that require protective suits to be available in kindergartens or schools near a nuclear plant, especially for students near nuclear plants that are concentrated in coastal regions, urging to come up with a measure to provide them with safety. He urged the country's education minister and local metropolitan offices of education to cooperate to check out how well schools near nuclear power plants nationwide are equipped with protective gear, and provide the schools with new guidelines as to which equipment is in accordance with this corporation known as IAEA, aka United Nations, which now rule the planet. And there really isn't any government. There's the international, or the United Nations, which George Bush Sr. calls them the New World Order, right? Everybody's taken, worldwide takes their marching order from this corporation of 195 militaries that shouldn't exist and doesn't have sovereignty over anybody's country. Yeah, let's play the clip of George Bush. Never get sick of George the pig. So this is quite a few years ago, where he repeatedly calls United Nations the New World Order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
So he's calling United Nations...
We have before us the opportunity to forge for...
He's calling United Nations a new world order. At least I got some supper in my teeth there. Apologies. That's the way it goes sometimes. News report on September 20th that 7 tons potential radioactive water was leaking. So 7 tons is not leak, it's an event, right? 14,000 pounds each day from cracks in the spent fuel storage pools at one of their nuclear power plants rocked the country. This was a scandal. The plant, after starting operations in 1982, had been permanently shut down in 2018 after a 30-year life expectancy, which is what all nuclear plants originally had. That was their charter, because they become brittle from neutrons and X-rays and gamma shines. Expectancy expired, but received technical upgrades to continue operating for a few years longer. So there was 7 tons a day leaking. And each fuel pool worldwide, there's 1,000 fuel pools. They put the reactor cores in the fuel pools. The fuel pools are still splitting the atoms. So you're talking about a catastrophic amount per liter. Probably 1 trillion atoms, man-made anthropogenic atoms, that are harmful to everything with replicating cells for millions of years. So it boils off about 120,000 liters a day. That's 120 tons a day. There's 414 nuclear reactors, but there's over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. And that's roughly 44 million tons a year released into the environment. 44 million tons is boiled off each year worldwide. That's 7 rows of traffic, bumper to bumper, wide around the entire planet if you stored it. If you put 1 ton of this radioactive lethal water, dirty bombs, in the back of a 1-ton pickup truck that's 20 feet long, that's 7 rows of traffic. If you do it over 40 years, because they've been doing it a lot longer than that, boiling off each day, it's equal to a rows of 1-ton trucks bumper to bumper wrapped around the planet, 280 rows wide, and it's equal to 1,700 feet wide lane of jam-packed trucks bumper to bumper with 1 ton in the back of it wrapped around the planet. This is catastrophic, what we're talking about now. So each day there's around 120 1-ton pickup trucks with 2,000 pounds of water, of lethal water by the liter in the back of it, evaporated into the environment, and that liberates the isotopes through the evaporation, because you can't destroy the isotopes, see? The reason that happens is because the fuel in the pools is still splitting the atoms it would to power 1 million homes. So you got 1,000 plants each day producing the same energy atoms that are pulsing energy every second, not just for 24 hours, but for millions of years, released into the environment each day. These are perpetual disease factories. This is why they're surrounded by farms on top of that. Very, 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 very concerning. Japan is planning on shipping more food. It targets farm export gains to blunt the weak yen's pain. Currently, their production out of the nuclear wasteland is double what it was the pre-meltdown. Until recently, 55 countries banned the food in 14 large prefectures. Right next door to Tokyo, and Tokyo obviously should have been barred worldwide. 55 countries banned it from 14 prefectures for over a decade. Canada lifted all restrictions after 93 days. So the only place they can ship the food for the first decade, the most dangerous decade, was to Canada, which is why everybody in Canada is sick. You wouldn't believe how many people in Canada, young people, drop dead from heart attacks every day. Every city. Because they're buying Fukushima food. In that picture, by the way, they're harvesting food for sale right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation in an evacuation zone because of radiation. They're completely out of control. It's completely out of control. They're gone murderous on the entire planet now through the food. Agricultural experts were among a clutch of sectors that the latest puppet Prime Minister targeted in a policy speech on Monday. Target of nearly doubling the agricultural exports of $13.8 billion annually by 2025, but it's not going to stop there. They're going to boost it. Farm exports further 5 trillion yen by 2030. So you're going to double it to 2 trillion yen by 2025, but a further 5 trillion. It's just surreal. It's just evil. Evil is now ruling the planet on us. And it's poisoning and attempting to slaughter us all through radioactive food from an actual nuclear wasteland. And the whole planet sits in silence and waits to be exterminated. Except for a very, very, very small group here that is understanding and hopefully rebelling. The yen's steep drop this year to a 24-year low. Well, that's because they're degenerate scum. In Gunma Prefecture, about 20 kilometers north of Tokyo, 40 small, and that Gunma was barred by 55 countries, 200 kilometers away from multiple nuclear meltdowns, for goodness sakes, still barred by 55 countries until last year. Still 14 countries today. The other countries that lifted the restrictions were so evil, with the shake of a hand, everybody's poisoned. About 40 small firms have begun exporting farm products since 2018. The Japan Trade Organization, every time you see that word, makes you shiver with contempt. A semi-governmentally, semi-governmental. As if the government can only meddle a little tiny bit in something. Export promotions entities that provided expertise on brand development, export pricing, and other export-related operations. In other words, they're really good at murdering you worldwide through your supermarkets. Guma's right by Tokyo on top of that. A peach farmer in Fukushima Prefecture north of Tokyo exports these products to Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, Hong Kong. Rival parties call for government's response to Japan's Fukushima water release plan. More than 1.2 million tons of tritium-laced water. That offends me when they tell that lie, by the way. That offends me. Let me walk you through the facts. Not that they matter, but let's do it anyway for posterity's sake. 2013, Mari Yamaguchi, 1,000 tanks. How many tanks they got today, Dana, 9 years later? Oh, 9,000. I'm sorry, 1,000. Hang on. Well, hello there, Gar. How are you, sir?
I'm good, but the weather isn't showing any good signs.
Physically.
We on the air there?
You're on the air. You're live, folks. This is Gar. For quite a few years, he's been giving us radiation counts from a spectrometer of different products. And you sent me some pictures there earlier. You're calibrating.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask if you got them all. You know, a couple of those were, some samples I took. There was like 4 different ones. It looked like a couple didn't make it through the text thing, so I resent them. But there was like 4 different ones, different screenshots. That's
I got them,
the
yeah.
computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can put those on the air. That's all it is.
Well, it's through my phone, right? So I was working when you sent it.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of them was, I didn't catch the rain at the right time or didn't get a lot, so I thought, well, I'll take just a little bit of dampness and get the road film,
with a paper
off
towel.
the truck with a paper towel and put it in there. And between the 2 isotopes, I got 5,666 point,
That was
something.
americium or cesium?
That's both of them. There was like 3,266 of the cesium and 2,399, point something.
Yeah, it's quite the spike. Wow.
Yeah. I've done double tests where, I'd wipe the road film off of the hood. And then when it would keep raining after the film was off of it, just to make sure it wasn't just the dirt. And it still showed up just in the water.
And for people who are not aware, you're in the United States, folks, he's talking about, on the west coast of North America.
East Coast, no.
I'm sorry, East Coast. Yeah, East Coast.
Michigan.
Right, my apologies.
I've taken this instrument to Georgia, too, so this isn't like, it doesn't go directly from Japan and just hit my town in Michigan. I've done this in other states, too, because I get around quite a bit. No,
exactly. Like, for it to show up there, it had to contaminate everything in between to make it that far, right? It's raining out all the time. Yeah.
Now, another thing, too, I I'm sure I mentioned this before. I've ran into people that work in the industry that do testing.
Right.
And I'm not the only one finding this stuff. I'm not going to say who or where, but they have found the same things. So,
it's still hammering us.
My testing, my testing is backed up, and I have 3 different instruments, and 2 of them will identify isotopes. But my favorite is the spectrometer because I can
isolate
see exactly what's going on. Yeah. I can see what's going on. But
that's crazy numbers. That's crazy numbers. Because my Geiger counter is not going to pick that up, right?
It will.
It'll pick up some of it, but it's not going to pick up.
Right. I remember you saying, the Geiger counters, they're 5th or 6th efficient?
Maybe, yeah.
So, yeah. Does the inspector, does that have a timer?
It does,
so
yeah.
You can,
yeah.
Okay.
I don't like doing that. I don't like it when I do that because it scares me. I've seen 12,000 on it. Like I was like, oh my God. I stopped doing that. That's a good point, actually. Because if you just if you just let it rack up the numbers, it'll frighten the daylights out of you. So I go counts per minute, right? Because it's a little bit less intimidating. But you're right. I used to run it. Are you going to be doing more samples between now and next week? Maybe. You don't know.
I neglected other things because I thought, well, I should, pick that and start it up and do a couple of things. But anyways, I pulled the filter out of my furnace and cut the filter up and
stuck it in there.
Put it under. And this dirty filter, the americium was 2,349.999, and then the cesium-137 was another 29.249999, and then the total was 5,274 with a liter of filter media. When I set my survey meter, right on it, and it buried the first scale past 500, flipped it up to the second scale, went up to like 700, just setting the thing on the filter.
Horrifying.
We're breathing. So
we're breathing it heavily. That's why all the species are disappearing. Okay, you got anything else you want to throw out there?
No, that should do it. I did get a couple in.
That's crazy cool. We appreciate it, eh? Big time.
Yeah, this eliminates all of the doubt or question in all this.
Yeah, this is not a game. No,
it's there, and we're ingesting it, and
well, the kids are the most vulnerable because they're close to the ground, right? And the animals and insects, But the children, my goodness, because that's their territory is low to the ground. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Okay, my friend, thank you, Gert. Good. Looking forward to your next call, man. Appreciate it, eh?
Whenever I can get to it, I'll give you a ring.
Yeah, do that. We're looking forward to it. Okay, my friend.
Okay.
Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye. Yeah, bye-bye. That's nasty news, folks. So recent testing today is showing between americium-241 and cesium-137 at over 5,000 counts per minute with the spectrometer. Let's cover the tanks for a quick second. He had 1,000 tanks in 2013. 1,000 tanks. and what they call tritium. You can't have tritium-laced water in these tanks. It just doesn't work that way. You're pouring the reactor cores over, or water over the melted remains of reactor cores. And they're not pumping it up from the bottom of the building. They're pumping it up from wells around the site. And they're not capturing it. What they're pumping up is what they're putting into the tanks. But that's just for samples. They're not actually retrieving the water. They're pouring over it. But they morphed that story since 2015 to hoodwink the entire population into believing that's exactly what they were doing. That all the water they were pouring over the reactor cores was going either through the filtration system and back over the melted reactor cores. And again, even if it was true, let's say they could do something like that. Well, you can't, because the filters that they're using, you won't be able to get within thousands of feet of them because of lethal doses after a couple of hours. They were talking 2.2 sieverts per liter going through the filter. So 2 liters is a lethal dose to a human. They'll die within a couple of weeks from that single exposure. So imagine pumping thousands of liters and tons even through the filter. Well, the filter now, you can't get inside the building. They changed the filter. The system didn't run. I can walk you through because we have the documentation. But that doesn't stop them from lying. In 2000, in August, they claimed that they had 1,000 tanks. In March 2014, they claimed they had 1,200 tanks. And in 2017, they had 900 tanks. Try walking with both of your feet on ankles, or heels rather, on the steel plates they got laid on the ground there for the homeless. It's a fake picture, right? It's a stage picture. Who knows why they staged it, but it's staged. In 2019, they got 1,000 tanks, and in 2021, they got 1,000 tanks. Here in Canada, I don't even know, like it hurts my brain every time I think about this lot from Ontario. Like last year, Bruce Power, which is a nuclear power company in Ontario, Canada, there was $4 billion available for renewable energy for storage. The government is so corrupt, Bruce Power took all $4 billion and is going to have pumped hydro for nuclear power plants, which they don't need. They run 24 hours a day, right? So that renewables couldn't have proof of concept. In the same province, the year before, they scuttled 700 wind farms because they were competitive with the nuclear power plant all of a sudden. So now they're holding emergency simulated plane crashes into Bruce Power's nuclear reactors. Not into their fuel pools, which have no containment, but into the reactors. And who knows how much money they wasted on that. All hands on deck for degenerate Bruce Power this week. Ontario's largest nuclear power plant. Despicable. They're the people that had the ban lifted, by the way, on radioactive food. It's those same people here in Canada. I'm not going to go through the whole story because I started screaming every time I read it. I had 4 nervous breakdowns by the time I finished capturing the article. A plane crashing into the nuclear power station in Canada. You just lose faith in humanity every time you look at the nuclear industry, don't you? The risk of a nuclear disaster grows every day. This was stories I didn't get to yesterday, by the way. We'll get to the other ones in a second. From 3 Mile Island to Chernobyl, the story of the atomic energy is littered with catastrophes. From Keystone from Chalk River to the Santa Susana is what I should be saying. Santa Susana was considered 460, the equivalent of 460 3-mile islands worth of radiation at the same time. Very few people even know that happened in 1959. It's still hemorrhaging today. They still haven't been able to clean it up. There was the Rocketdyne site down by Los Angeles. And because they hid it away, 500,000 people now live within 10 miles of an ongoing multiple nuclear meltdown site. The industry is so corrupt. Well, this is a new book, Atoms and Ashes. One thing we learned, now I never read the story, so I can't really say this particular time, the book, but what we have learned was that the majority of the books are meant to lead you away from the facts. At some point I'll end up reading that book. It's a plan to discuss screening for nuclear plants over 60 years old. Press conference for Diablo Canyon. Do you know how the Diablo Canyon got its extension? It still has 3 years of shelf life, right? And so in those 3 years, they could have replaced it with renewables easily. Instead, so last month, Senator Scott Wiener in San Francisco allowed a drug addiction bill titled SB 864 to be gutted and replaced with a bill to give PG&E $1.4 billion to keep the broken Diablo Canyon nuclear plant operating for another 5, possibly 10 to 20 years. Wiener, using the tactic of gutting the original bill, subverted the California Constitution, which requires 30 days prior submittal before a vote of legislation. The bill was printed after midnight on August the 28th and voted on midnight of August the 31st, 2 days. And the people of California were prevented from knowing anything about the crooked bill. Wow, eh? Extending... and my apologies. That's known to happen. Extending the legal life of nuclear reactors placed safety at risk. This was a very, very rare dissent in Japan. This is the editorial, one of the major medias in Japan, saying extending the legal life of these disease factories placed safety at risk. This is the new NRC, which was created after Fukushima melted down, by the way. After the new chairman of non-regulatory agencies. Bipartisan agreement. So the cap was a rule established on a bipartisan agreement reached through the Diet debate to focus on the bitter lessons learned after the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster. It must not be casually changed after just 10 years. So Japan's word is just for a few years, right? That seems to be the consensus when we talk about Japan. No, we won't do nothing like that. You can trust us. And when you stop looking, they're going to come out and cut your throat and go through your pockets. New report paints gloomy picture of the world's nuclear industry. New report paints a gloomy picture of the world's disease factories. The amount of electricity generated worldwide by nuclear energy increased by 3.9% last year. It might sound like a growth industry, but China is one of the few places where nuclear power is on the rise. In countries like France, India, United States, nuclear electricity generation is declining. It's a lot of posturing, right? At the end of 2021, the world had 437 nuclear reactors. However, 23 reactors have not generated power since at least 2013, which means there's 414, which was the numbers I used earlier. For example, reactors in France had their worst performance in years, and reports says the worst is yet to come. Not only that, they're gone on strike down there today, so there's no repairs on 9 reactors happening. In the States, legislators have passed large new subsidies for nuclear power to keep it existing at the very last second. Because they knew it was going to happen. These things were decrepit and brittle and were supposed to be closed down. They didn't build anything to replace them. So when it come time, then they said, well, we got nothing to replace them. We got to give them an extension. If that's not evil, what actually is? They have the money because they've been fleecing your country with high bills each year. But in some places, no longer economical. Low carbon emission energy sources afloat in a climate change. So nuclear is not low carbon. Every time you hear the word low carbon and nuclear, you should be outraged. You should be 100% upset about anybody suggesting that it's low carbon. It's a complete fabrication. And it's an insidious, it's a sinister fabrication, I should say. Japan's safety authorities agree on a controversial plan to release more than 1.3 million cubic meters. Well, like, again, hang on. Bleh. Damn you, nuclear. You scum. And Korea's incompetent too, by the way. Not just degenerate nuclear. They don't even know where to start anymore. They tell so many lies you can't even keep up with them. There we go. TEPCO, this is August the 12th, 2014. My apologies. TEPCO to abandon the Areva system, which was France's water filtration system, for the last 3 years since the nuclear meltdown has been unused. In other words, they didn't use the Areva system. And the same thing with the SARI system for the cesium. But it was the same thing, if you read this story, TEPCO unable to bring contaminated water issues under control. Oh, that's right, they took that site down a couple of months ago after I started using the documentation. The Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, has yet to function reliably. The Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, when was that, I wonder? Oh, that's 2014. You can't filter it because it's a lethal dose in the filter immediately. You can never get near the equipment again, which is, and they recognize that, they acknowledge that. TEPCO says groundwater bypass operations not having effects, by the way, 2014. Oh, and the fence that they were going to install for $1 billion, yeah, they didn't do that either to make the radiation stop going in the ocean, as if a fence was going to stop it. The ice wall operation is not meeting expectations. In other words, everything that they tried failed, and everything they try fails. The ice wall, by the way, why would you build an ice wall rather than a real wall? Why wouldn't you do a real wall? They claimed there was 260,000 people worked on the ice wall, folks. 260,000 people. Not engineers, not academics, not institutions, not corporations, but 260,000 homeless worked on the wall. But that's not true either, because if you paid them all $1,060 each, you went through all the money that you had, and you never had nothing left to build the wall. So unless you paid everybody $50 each, and even then, you couldn't have built the wall because you need all that equipment. Lies. It's hard to appreciate the lies. And a map of radioactive fallout taken by an American plane at 1,000 feet above the ground. 1,000 feet above the ground. Found 3 million becquerels per square meter of just iodine-131, 20 kilometers away. These are huge. You can't have that number without similar numbers of the rest of the isotopes. It's not relegated to little old 20 kilometer zone, by the way. That's why I hate nuclear, because it's so freaking complicated to tell the story. It's an absurd amount of work. This is a 16-day radioactive fallout map. 16 days. 16 days. 16 days it covers the whole planet. This is France's model, the French government. Did I mention that? EU Energy Commissioner calls Fukushima an apocalypse and that almost everything is under control. France says Japan has lost control and the French should leave the country. Not just Fukushima, but the country. Swiss did the same thing, got out of the country. And appropriately and properly too. Tokyo has lost almost all control of events at Fukushima. You can't control that. Chernobyl was 600 helicopter pilots died in the first 2 weeks. That's why TEPCO didn't use the helicopter, despite the lies where they claimed they did. The helicopter tried once. The radiation was so high, they dumped their load as they were pulling away to go faster, not on the actual buildings. TV, nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima. And the American-Japanese ambassador said this could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world. This could one day be considered a catastrophic event for the world. And they were right, 100% right. Officials unsure what to do next. South Korea called Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. I give South Korea all the credit in the world, buddy, because I will guarantee you they are the only country that is supplying kindergarten and schools with evacuation suits for the children. Thousands of evacuation suits at the school, not many, but some. When the big, because there's 1,100 schools are within 20 or 30 kilometers of a nuclear plant in Japan, which is hemorrhaging or South Korea, which are all nuke plants are hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools. I've been heartbroken all day about this, by the way, because when I done the math again today, I was shocked. It really sunk in for me how terrible this actual industry is. It impacted me permanently. Japan's business group in Taipei. So a bunch of Japanese businesses in Taiwan support Taiwan's Trans-Pacific Partnership because Taiwan decided that they will import food from the nuclear wasteland permanently with no checks and balances. And that's why the businesses in Taiwan that are Japanese now support. So Taiwan said, look, we'll poison everybody in the supermarkets if you let us join your Trans-Pacific Partnership. And Japan said, well, let's see you do it first and then maybe. Said, okay. So they poisoned everybody and then Japan said, okay, you can probably join our little murderous group of idiots. Because that's what nuclear is. It's a bunch of idiots with no checks and balances and a lot of money. That's how you describe nuclear. Evil with a lot of money and evil intentions. Japan business community. If I was in South Korea, I'd burn down every one of them. I wouldn't hesitate at all. Japan's business group, well, that's a figure of speech, folks. Japan's business group in Taipei voices support for degenerate, revolting Taiwan's hideous betrayal. Fraud suspected among coronavirus testing firms in 6 prefectures. You catch that story? It's all a fraud. It's all a scamdemic anyway. Organizations that conducts the tests receive subsidies of 19,500 yen per test. This is $65 a test. And they got a huge budget that they can steal, right? There are about 13,000 testing sites nationwide. What a scam that is. Remember, China and India had to take back billions of contaminated tests that were false positive. And the CDC even had hundreds of millions they had to try to get back that were sent out, were all contaminated with the virus, they said. So everything came back positive. That's how they got the statistics so high, right? 100% scam. Brazil's nuclear power industry preparing for new dawn. Yeah, we hear this is usually posturing, right? The expansions of nuclear energy in Brazil. They can't even manage their sewage, for God's sakes. Like Africa, right? You know, bless their hearts, but they can't manage their own pollution, let alone lethal pollution. And that's why the industry likes them, because they can't handle they're dysfunctional, so the industry loves it. Guaranteed to poison everybody. Just make sure that you set it up in farmers' fields like all the other nuclear plants. No nuclear power renaissance as Europe wrestles energy crisis. The energy crisis because the NATO and UN countries in place the self-inflicted embargo that the instant effects was felt immediately to the most impoverished of the country and every facet of the country by inflation in 195 countries. Immediately caused inflation. It's 100% scripted through the World Economic Forum. And we covered the newest marching orders last night, right, from the World Economic Forum. Put your nuclear waste under the ocean was one of the things they were talking about. And we're seeing that now come to fruition. No nuclear power renaissance is Europe, Al Jazeera, as Europe wrestles energy crisis. Well, how are you going to have a nuclear renaissance? Right? Because you need something right away. And these takes decades to come to fruition. The small modular reactor fable is never going to come to fruition. They've been at it for 50 years already. They got one design approved, which is just the very first of 500 stages it's got to go through. Then you got to actually get a physical plant working. No, it's meant to delay this. They're trying to stop the renewable industry from crushing them, and they know they can't, right? So they're doing every dirty tactic in the book to delay the inevitable. And what I mean by that is last year, there was 290 gigawatts of renewables in a 12-month period came online. The year before it was 262 gigawatts. But say 260 gigawatts is 300 nuclear power plants, the animosity equivalent of renewables. And so 291 is 333 gigawatts of renewables coming online in just 12 months. So in 24 months, it was over 630 nuclear power plants, large full-size nuclear plants came online in renewables. The minute you pair that up with compressed air storage or pumped hydro or water batteries, or you back it up with geothermal and tidal energy or something like that, well, geothermal can take over the whole planet. Just tear out whatever plants is closing down, gas, oil, coal, nuclear, just leave everything there, drill down, hit geothermal, 800, 900 consistent degree temperatures, and with no commodities. You don't got to be importing train loads of anything. It's right there under your toes the whole time. And so that's been scuttled by the nuclear industry. Now they're trying to pretend that small modular reactors and fusion is going to be the Holy Grail, when the Holy Grail is already smashing all of their... Like, there's 414 reactors on the planet. In the last 2 years, there were 630 large nuclear power plants came online in renewables. In just 48 months, for God's sakes. And so by 2026, from 2020 to 2026, a 6-year period, the Energy Institute estimates at least 4,800 gigawatts of renewables will come online, which is equal to 5,500 large nuclear power plants coming online at the one time. Or total. In just a 6-year period, nuclear can never compete with that, see? And that's equal, by the way, to all gas, oil, coal, nuclear plants currently on the planet. And so the gas, oil, coal, and nuclear are being curb stomped by renewables. And the only thing holding it back, and is barely holding it back, is storage. And so they concocted all kinds of schemes. Like I said earlier about Bruce Power, stole $4 billion meant for storage for renewable and flipped it and using it for storage for decrepit nuclear power plants in Ontario. The nuclear industry in Canada is truly evil. It's evil. It's what it's doing is, there's no comparison anywhere on the planet in evilness. We got nothing comes close to the Canadian disgusting nuclear industry. There is no nuclear power renaissance, not just Europe but anywhere else. It's 100% posturing. It's desperation. They're clutching at straws and they're holding the planet hostage. And you need to make a stand. I can't do it alone. The world needs to voice the truth. And I provide it constantly, and will continue to do the best I can for you. But the world needs to make a stand with me. And we're only talking about, we're not exaggerating or misrepresenting or misconstruing anything. We're talking about 100% authentic documentation. Russia's $200 million nuclear exports untouched by EU sanctions. Yeah, they sanctioned everything but nuclear because they can't get their precious disease factories up and running without... There'd be no inflation for the nuclear industry, right? Agricultural exports core to Japan's growth strategy. The best thing to do is buy nothing from Japan. If you buy it, burn it on video and put it up on the internet so people can enjoy it. 2 Belgium nuclear reactors fail in a week. There's a whole bunch of confidence in it. Short circuit in the operating system of the control rods. Can you imagine how bad that could actually go for us? Way to go, Belgium. The degenerate IAEA that should never exist. They're not the authorities. This is a corporation that has somehow superseded common sense worldwide. IAEA reviews Slovenia's nuclear emergency preparedness and response framework. Like, why would you trust, if you look at the IAEA legacy, how the hell can anybody trust them? How does that actually work? They really only went to Fukushima, and we can't even prove it this year for the first time. And you can't even prove that. They shot a video, but the camera didn't move. There was no evidence to suggest that they were actually at Fukushima. When it was easily, all they had to do was move the camera around and they could finally prove it. Man, there's no men at the IAEA or no women. They're just idiots and scum. We haven't seen any acts of good faith from that corporation since they existed. We've seen endless revolting betrayals. United Kingdom and France, which has got half their reactor fleet, is seized up and broken down to take joint control of Sizewell C nuclear plant. Sizewell C nuclear plant. Oh, Chicago. Hello, Chicago. Oh, God. That's, why are you stalking me? Shouldn't you be out raping puppies or something?
We're not stalking you.
You are stalking me. You are stalking me. You are stalking me. Don't cut me off on my own show. You are stalking me.
Do you like music?
You've been stalking me.
Do you want to sing a song together?
You've been.
Do you like Bob Marley? I got a song for you. Can I sing Bob Marley song?
Well, that's disgusting, eh? These people are stalking me. I've seen them call me 40 times in a show. That's really something, that is, to stalk me like that. Told me he wants to rape me. He says he got a big dick and he's going to rape me one day. He's not hilarious. He's a monster. UK and France to take control of Sizewell. The deal over the ownership of Sizewell C plant in Suffolk's East England is among the first fruits of a rapprochement between the two countries after years of discord in the wake of Brexit. Again, this is nonsense. The project is vital to Britain's future electricity supply. They knew that they were going to have to replace their nuclear reactors, right? They knew there was a point where they're going to shut them off. And so instead of building more nuclear or something else to replace it, they didn't. They waited until the very last second, and then they said, well, this is Boris Johnson, at the random blueness, announced that the nuclear industry has told him that they want to build more nuclear power plants. And they're surrounded by farms. Not like they actually show you the pictures of the future nuclear plant at an old nuclear plant site, by the way, surrounded by farms. It's surrounded by farms. It's really something that they continue to do this. Even future plants are going to be surrounded by farms because they're hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools at an amount that is just catastrophic to all species. It's not tenable. It's not sustainable. The planet needs to gut up and fight back. The nuclear industry needs to drop a bit of rope around their neck and throw them in the ocean. Small reactors could make nuclear energy big again. Again, this is nonsense to suggest that the small modular reactors are even necessary, let alone going to happen. They don't have any anywhere on the bloody planet. The case for nuclear is the most efficient form of clean energy. It's the most dirty energy in human history. Starters, each plant needs 2 external power supplies dedicated to it. Has 2 large gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to it. It needs to suck in 1 million gallons of water a minute. Each glass would have 1 billion creatures in it. And 75 to 100 million of them would be the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, the basis the carbon sequestering chain, per glass of water. 1 billion creatures in eggs and larvae boiled, so 16 million times 1 billion creatures boiled every minute at 414 nuclear plants worldwide each minute, at each one of them. There's nothing efficient about nuclear. It's what, 3% of fission or something? If you got rid of the nuclear plant and used the two external coal, gas, and oil plants, you're producing the same power. So why are you using the nuclear? New nuclear, because it's to murder you, and it's to poison the entire biosphere. These are weapons of mass destruction. These are bioweapons and chemical weapons facility. In the late 50s, they were described as bioweapons. The releases from a nuclear plant are catastrophically large, and they don't go away for billions of years. They hunt everything with replicating cells and attack it. Nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it, including you and your children and your friends and your families and your loved ones. Particularly the insects and the birds and the mammals and the animals have no way of defending against this invisible plague, this invisible atomic plague. New nuclear reactor produces nuclear energy more safely and eliminates nuclear waste. They're talking about mixed oxide fuel, which produces an absurd amount of waste. For starters, it's illegal in Canada, United States. The small modular reactors produce, if you scale it up in size, produces 35 times more dangerous intermediate level waste and 30 times more high level waste and 5 times more fuel rod than a conventional reactor. So the claim that they produce more safely is impossible. It's mixed oxide fuel. The releases are catastrophic. We can't keep doing this. We can't have a future. There is no future with these disease factories on your planet. If you had a carrying event where you have a solar flare come through, all these plants loses power, they all melt down at one time. And within 50 minutes of losing power, these will melt down. They're under enormous pressures, 1,000 to 2,000 psi, enormous temperatures. U.S., Canada, Canadian regulators further, this is the World Nuclear News, this is a lobbying group that Google puts up on their front pages almost every single day, along with World Nuclear Engineering, right? 2 lobbying groups. And they don't care. They don't care who you are, where you are on the planet. If you're pro-nuclear, you're a friend of scum, right? Of the scum that is the World Nuclear News. U.S. Canadian regulatories, we don't have a regulatory, we have a captured agency, but we don't have a functional regulatory agency. Further small modular reactor collaboration. There is no collaboration. You don't have reactors. They don't exist. You can't collaborate on something that doesn't exist. But they signed these memorandum of understandings so that nothing else can replace the energy source, only something that don't exist. They're extremely intelligent folks, don't get me wrong. They're unbelievably articulate. They have incredible amount of degrees, have a massive, absurd amount of money to make it happen, but they still can't make it happen. They steal the money. Only about 10% makes it into physical products. The other 90% of it goes to administration. Just saying. ENEC to showcase success of UAE, which is a degenerate rogue country, by the way. Nuclear energy at a global meeting in Prague. Global meeting of degenerates. I'd like to go down there and capture every one of them, waterboard them, each of them 195 times. Exactly 195 times. Anybody know why I want to waterboard them 195 times? It's a pun, right? 195, 196, who's counting? I like to drown them 195 times each. Decarbonization with the most carbon-intensive thing on the planet. But carbon is good, by the way, because you can't have insects or plants or biota or trees or anything else without carbon. The industry's a genocide machine is the only way to describe them. And generations of them, inbreeding, the current generation in the nuclear industry are the entitled lot. They're completely detached from any kind of conscience or reality. Their parents were scumbags. They're going to be scumbags. Their children will be scumbags. And eventually you end up with the generation we got now, which is degenerate scumbags. Nuclear Engineering International, which is a lobbying group for the nuclear industry, posing as a media. KBR contracted to support UK nuclear waste service. We covered that a little bit last week. So here's United Kingdom. They're going to put their nuclear waste site under the ocean, which is the marching orders we've seen from the World Economic Forum yesterday, by the way. Under the ocean. The ocean. The most evilest spot you could possibly think of to put it, this is where they want to put it. There's no checks and balances to stop them. Unless the world comes to its senses, they're going to murder the planet and destroy its ability to survive. That's what they're up to. The only way you can look at nuclear is, what's the worst they could do? That's what they're up to. When you start digging into it, then you're like, crap, that's what they're up to, for God's sakes. Nuclear police officers, only in the United Kingdom, folks. In the United Kingdom, nuclear industry is the ultimate disgusting, thank God Australia doesn't have nuclear power plants, because they would kill us all by now. But the British are well at it, work to try. Nuclear police officers. Can you imagine the arrogance these people actually have? Can you imagine the hubris that these people actually have? What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a nuclear police officer. We don't bother the farmers. We bother anybody that take pictures or uses a Geiger counter. I can barely contain myself with contempt sometimes for these people. U.S. invests $290 million in a drug for use in a radiological nuclear emergency. This is a new drug, folks. It's meant to make your blood plate end plate is approved to treat blood cell injuries that accompany acute radiation syndrome in adult and pediatric patients. It scares me every time I hear the word they're going to do it to children. Because the legacy of the nuclear industry in children is genocide. From Eggen USA Incorporation, which is based in California. It stimulates productions of platelets and helps reduce radiation-induced bleeding. And the Center for Disease Control and Prevention defines acute radiation syndrome, which is also known as radiation toxicity, radiation sickness, as an illness caused by radiation of the entire body, which is what Fallout does. It gives you a whole body x-rays, because you got gammas, alphas, neutrons, betas pulsing energy at the same time, almost at the speed of light. They hit each other, they don't mingle, so they change direction almost at the speed of light. That creates an x-ray. And so all the birds and animals and mammals and insects are getting full body x-rays, and humans, from and inhaling and breathing and consuming and ingesting and drinking and washing in gammas and alphas and betas and neutrons, isotopes, physical isotopes. Our planet now is a soup of man-made isotopes, exterminating everything. And if you go look at my research expeditions, you'll see what I'm talking about. Anyway, on to the next one. Evil never takes a break. Every page of nuclear, it's just evil, 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 evil. And I do around 900 a day, 900 pages a day or something. UN Human Rights Council 51, UK position on nuclear legacy resolution. Technical assistance capabilities building to address the human rights implication of nuclear legacy in the Marshall Islands. This was the UN. Now, the victims in the Marshall Islands of insidious radioactive fallout, and like Castle Bravo nuclear test, was equal to 1,000 Hiroshimas of radioactive fallout. They would regularly have lethal doses of 5,000 square miles from their radioactive fallout, folks. So UN, they say, is going to help the people in the Marshall Islands with negotiations in their own country with America. America refuses now to help them. They destroyed, that's the nuclear industry. They destroy these incredible, beautiful, pristine atolls, these wonderful, magical islands in tropical paradises. Nuclear industry went there and wrecked it permanently for millions of years. The Marshall Islands is over 1 million square kilometers, is too radioactive to be sustainable for people and species to live there without being permanently harmed. Japan exaggerates nuclear wastewater safety with faulty dosimeters. It never stops, does it? It's a perpetual misery machine, no matter just reading it or experiencing it. It's just a perpetual, monstrous. The Tokyo Electric Power, you gotta love this story. I gotta put it on the big screen just so in case you're trying to read it yourself later. I'll make my head as small as I can here. The Tokyo Electric Power Company, aka Murder Incorporation, and we got a poll tonight. Should these degenerate cuckoos be removed? It never stops around here. Should TEPCO be stripped of authority from Fukushima nuclear meltdown site? That's why we got a call earlier, because we had that poll up there, right? And they're stalkers. We got 49% of the people are like, yeah, baby. So get a load of this story. The Tokyo Electric Power Company exaggerated the safety of the treated, which is not treated as I showed you earlier. It didn't work in 2014, 2011, 12, 2013, or 2014. Neither the Siri, nor the Riva, nor the ELP system. With a dosimeter that fails to detect certain radioactive substances in Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the local media. Well, they're so used to being evil, someone finally called them out on it. Don't worry, they'll get over that. They'll find another lie to cover up that lie, I'm sure. When demonstrating the safety of the treated nuclear wastewater, the company used a dosimeter, which is supposed to be a Geiger counter, not a dosimeter, that fails to detect radioactive tritium. And again, to suggest that tritium is what you're looking for is ludicrous. It's a complete misrepresentation of what you're supposed to be doing. Only responds to high concentrations of cesium. So it's calibrated that it doesn't work until you get a high concentration. That's not evil. That's just the industry. That's normal. That's what they do. They are evil. The devil quit their job and walked away because TEPCO showed up. During tours at the plant, TEPCO put a dosimeter that detects only gamma rays near a bottle containing so-called treated water. Every time I hear this word treated water, I just have this incredible contempt for these people. This incredible evil to suggest that they're able to do it, let alone are doing it. As a demonstration, the water is safe according to the newspaper. However, the water contained in tritium is 15 times the amount of the release standard, it reports. The gamma rays may affect the human bodies due to external exposure and generated by radioactive cesium contained in the radiation-tainted water. It's contaminated with uranium, plutonium, and americium, and neptunium, and strontium, and the biggest byproduct is curium. With a U, not an O. According to TEPCO, this shouldn't exist, and really doesn't, right? It was nationalized immediately. Nuclear, calling it wastewater drives me insane. Even calling it nuclear wastewater is insane. It's not wastewater, it's lethal by the liter. You can't filter it. From cooling core meltdowns, from multiple nuclear reactor meltdowns, they're pouring it directly over the fuel, so it's picking up fuel particulates minimum. This is why it's lethal by the liter. Anyway. Tritium cannot be removed. Again, right? Because that's the idea of the lie, is to keep the lie alive. NATO loses track of a Ruski, world's largest nuclear power submarine. We're going to get to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in a minute, hopefully. The Russians, they apparently they found it the next day. Montebello, 70 years later, Montebello. What have I got done here? Montebello is a group of 260 islands off Australia. The British decided it was a beautiful paradise. The British went out there and irradiated the daylights out of it permanently. 70 years later, still too radioactive to stay there for more than an hour, which means you're not supposed to be there, period. The legacy that keeps killing is nuclear industry. It's really good at being evil. That's the only thing it's actually good at. It's no good at nuclear and energy, but it's good at evil. It excels. IAEA breaks the ground to expand and modernize the Swedish laboratories. Of course, this is the World Nuclear Engineering International, which is a joint lobbying, pro-nuclear lobbying group. Look how stupid they look there, with all of them there with their suits on. Construction of his new nuclear application laboratory buildings. Like, you have to be in this IAEA's building in Switzerland, or in Austria. They're good. They're extraordinarily good at being degenerates, aren't they? Gordon MP Richard Thompson College for Veterans UK nuclear testing program to receive recognition for their services. Most of them are already dead. 70 years later. The people that they made sit out on purpose to get poisoned so they can study them like guinea pigs and their children for the rest of their lives. It was done on purpose, right? Worldwide, we see that as a consensus. UN experts said Japan should do more for the Fukushima evacuees. This is a special rapporteur who said even if they voluntarily moved, that they should be taken care of. Because they're fighting over whether there was harm or not, when there was unequivocal, incredible, brutal harm. No matter where you lived in Japan or on the planet, you were harmed. Let me explain that, I guess, because why not? So this is day 19, that corner picture where I'm pointing, of radioactive fallout from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research model, which is only based on a fraction of the actual releases on top of that. You can't keep up with it, can we? Nuclear safety chiefs rep local firms transporting radioactive material. They didn't follow protocol. And they got caught at it. The rest of them are doing the same thing. They just didn't get caught. No nuclear power renaissance as Europe wrestles energy crisis. Well, how can you have a renaissance that's going to be here decades too late? Why would you try that? Because it's desperation. It's just posturing. It's very dangerous desperation, very dangerous posturing, But that's all it really is. It's posturing. Technological geriatrics will not ensure survival of nuclear power. Oh, this is Schneider. Yeah, this is the French Schneider who does the synopsis each year on nuclear. Let's read a bit of that, because that's actually important. The latest World Nuclear Industry Status Report shows that nominal net nuclear generation capacity fell by 0.4 gigawatts between 2020 and 2021. Even though 6 new nuclear reactors were switched on throughout the world last year, it brought the share of nuclear power in the global electricity mix to below 10%. Right? Michael Schneider, he does the synopsis report each year, and he has said, in 1920 he said, face it, nuclear is irrelevant. And he quantified that by showing that renewables is curb stomping the despicable scum nuclear industry. His team of experts revealed that there were 98 startups and 105 nuclear closures in nuclear plants over the last 2 decades. In other words, nuclear, like I've been saying for many years, it's posturing, but it's very dangerous posturing because they're stopping real technology from advancing, from doing the job that it can do, from the planet having a future, from the species having hope, which they shouldn't, unfortunately, be able to enjoy, because the nuclear industry is exterminating the planet with radioactive fallout on a scale that is stunning. UN experts says Japan should do more for Fukushima evacuees. And so that's got a lot of traction. But this one, Mari Yamaguchi, right, which is normally the cover story, right? They roll her out. We've covered her for a decade. She's the one that comes out with the official cover story each time and then gets regurgitated from there. Regardless of whether they fled forcibly or not, they should be helped. Which is, look, the problem is Japan refuses to acknowledge there was radioactive fallout that was harmful. The nuclear industry refuses to acknowledge that they even melted down for several years. And they only done that in attempts to trick the population and to make them complacent. And by the time they figured it out, it'd be too late to do anything. The reason we're in this much trouble is because the nuclear industry had blew up the bridges so rescuers couldn't do the job. 3 reactors at the Fukushima nuclear plant melted. It was 4 of them, 8 fuel pools, and most likely the common spent fuel pool 2 and reactor 6. Because of the redacted pictures that came out last year, right? It was 736, and you'll see them in my playlist, a video on it, where we go through it. And these were drone shots. When we zoomed in, all the reactors, except for reactor 5, were redacted, and heavily, including the common spent fuel pool, was completely redacted in the pictures. It was like, why would they release these pictures on the 10th anniversary, really? Unless they're trying to warn you, which is obviously... And nobody's ever covered those pictures on EME, on top of that. So we got a whole presentation. You'll see it in my playlist if you look for it. United Nations human rights expert Cecilia says Japan should do more for the Fukushima evacuees. Bless her heart for speaking out. And that's amazing she got any traction. It's stunning that she actually got any traction. Because it showed up in probably 50 or 60 medias that I've seen. South Korea urges international discussion of Japan's Fukushima plant at the London Convention. South Korea, of course, is perpetrating the lie that they're filtering the water. So is China. It's obviously they're working together. Both of them are pro-nuclear countries on top of that are advancing their nuclear industries, right? And they're trying to perpetrate the deceit that everything is filtered. And that's another story. Japan, Fukushima, evacuees is the same thing. We counted the tanks. There's not 1,000. There's 750 if you count the small ones too, right? We're looking for the Ukraine stuff. Nuclear waste, we got to cover this story. Nuclear waste is a deciding issue in South Bruce Council race. My apologies. I got a lot going on here in the studio at the same time. Sometimes I smurf up. The election signs are up in the municipality of South Bruce, which is Canada, Ontario, Canada, where this little community gets to decide the fate of the entire country of Canada. It's a farming community. They bought 1,800 acres of prime farmland to have their nuclear dump. And they want surrounding farmers to continue to farm, and they're going to farm that property for 40 years while they're bringing nuclear fuel rods there. Everything is vented on the road, and it's repackaged when it's there, which means it's vented. We just seen them give the native community up to $6 million as a sign of good faith. No, you keep it, the venture language or whatever you want to do with it. No, we're not trying to buy you off. Here's $6 million. As the community decides whether they want to be the permanent home. Now, the industry says it's not going to put a dump unless they're welcomed by the community, because it's the city community welcomes, which we hope they don't, because they're surrounded by 7,000 lakes. The city community says, yeah, let's put the dump here. By the time they actually build it and start putting stuff down into it, it'll be in the 40s, 2040 something. Which means you're looking at over 40 years. If they go ahead with it right now, it will be over 40 years before they finally put anything in a repository. Everything is still splitting the atom into the environment for those 40 years. It's on purpose. It's 100% on purpose. And because there's so much controversy, there's no way the community is going to give consent. So they got to go find another community, start all over again. In other words, there'll never be a repository, and that's the idea. Right? Otherwise, they would put it where no one's going to object and get the job done. 5.5 million fuel rods. Under 1,500 acres of farmers' fields. Farmland, not farmers' fields. Farmland, where they're going to continue to produce food in the nuclear wasteland. But for hundreds of thousands of years, it's not leaking. No, you disturb the rock and the cracks form in the water. So in order to build these deep geological repositories, they have to explode, detonate all kinds of explosives, which is going to cause fissions, right? And now it's no longer stable. But they're not going to put it there if the community objects to it. And so they got a big group that opposes and a big group that wants it, and that group they're throwing millions of dollars at. This group, of course, doesn't have that. That's going to guarantee the endless fighting and guarantee it's not going to happen. But the fact that they bought 1,500 acres there, they're claiming, but I think it was 1,800. Let's say it's 1,500 for the sake of an argument. We cover it all the time, mind you. All nuclear plants, except for a couple of them, are surrounded by farms, right up to the facilities they're talking about. Ukraine nuclear plant, again today, has lost power again. Every second, third day. The question really is, should they have shut this plant down a long time ago? Long before the bombs started falling on their doorsteps. And the answer was obvious, right? Because if you lose external power, or you destroy the transformers at the site, the generators won't matter. If you hit the fuel pool, it doesn't matter how many generators you got, it's going to melt down right away. Fuel pools are outside the plant on top of that, and there's no containment, no protection. So, like, Bruce Power done a few weeks ago, or a week ago, were doing drills in Ontario nuclear plant for planes crashing into the reactors, which are hardened, but the fuel pools are not. And they contain maybe 10 reactor cores. So what's worse, the plane hitting the reactor core or the plane hitting 10 reactor cores with no containment? The industry, like in a normal world, it would never get to this stage. In a normal world, when you did find out this was happening, the police would raid them and close them down, like they've done at Rocky Flats, for instance. But in a normal world, the industry, there is no normal world. The industry has been in charge for so long, there can never be a normal world again. And so Ukraine had shut all of its reactors down. The last one got shut down a couple of weeks ago after losing power multiple times and having to start up generators and all kinds of... it's brutal amount of headlines. So the nuclear industry got to come out and try to defend itself and pretend that it's got redeeming qualities, but it doesn't. It's always a deceit and dishonesty and deception, right? But Ukraine has been under siege for so long. There's so much stress. Like these bombs landing close by is like an earthquake. These reactors are old or brittle from neutron bombardment, from X-rays, from gamma shines, from decades of this kind of physical abuse, from this high energy that's consistent and high pressure. You're talking 1,000 to 2,000 psi pressure. You're talking enormous amounts of heat. And then you're also talking, of course, the neutron bombardment and the gamma shines, the X-rays and everything else. So you have all these elements stressing all of these resources and presses and containments. They become brittle. And so you're having all these earthquakes from bombs falling. These are real earthquakes. These are real jolts that at high pressure, it just takes a hairline crack. And so imagine a hairline crack in a tank at 1,000 psi. What happens when it finally gives in? It's like a detonation, right? Because of the high pressure. Well, if you go look up videos of car tires being overpressurized. That's a catastrophic explosion, right? Imagine something 200 feet tall, and inside of it is a vessel at 1,000 psi detonating. Very worrisome, and there's good reasons to be worried. By the way, those fuel pools down there are hemorrhaging radiation all the time. They have allegedly, now you can't believe, right, because it's the legacy of lies, you can't believe a single word the International Atomic Energy Agency is going to tell you. You got to read between the lines. You can't you're insane to believe anything they tell you. They've been caught. All they do is lie. They told so many lies for so many decades, they can't tell the truth. It's impossible for them to tell the truth. Because anybody's paying attention and go, wait a second, you've been lying to us now for 7 years. Right? And then they invoked the United Nations. How did the United Nations, a corporation, a subsidy of a military-industrial complex, become the arbiter worldwide? You got any idea how stupid that is? How ludicrous it is? How insane it is not to do the right thing a single time in decades. Urgent imperative. Nuclear plant is an auxiliary power. We're hearing that every second day now. I don't know what's going to happen, but if it happens, and the interesting thing about this disease factory in particular is it's surrounded by farms. It's so evil to have a nuclear power plant surrounded by farms because you're hemorrhaging so much radiation from the fuel pools that are still splitting atoms, and a catastrophic amount of atoms. Europe's largest nuclear plant loses remaining power source due to shelling. Shelling. I don't know anymore. Oh, that was, I was going to check and see the discrepancy. Okay, oh, there you go. We made it through the show anyway. I don't know how. It's so frustrating to see this industry with no incentive not to be evil. There's no incentive for the nuclear industry not to be evil. There's every incentive, though, for it to be evil. And we made it through a good show. I thought we did. So we raised 130 last night. James Lucid donated, and that's a huge deal for me. We're struggling. There's so much gone wrong. I went out and tried to take off the manifold, because you got to take off the fuel rail. You got to take the injectors out. You got to take that whole piece. You got to disconnect everything and peel it all back. You gotta bolt. You gotta unclip everything around the manifold, and you gotta take off all the cowlings. And I couldn't do it today. It was too chilly. I'll try again tomorrow, I suppose. We can't afford to get a mechanic to do it. We gotta change the fuel pump, which is hid away in probably the stupidest place imaginable. It's inside the manifold. So once you get all of it off, you still got to take that apart, change the fuel pump, put it all back together, get it all to line up, hope none of the filter or the gaskets are bad shape. Jeez. And man, I'm just heartbroken we're not out on the ocean. I'm absolutely heartbroken. Let's close the poll up, I guess. Should TEPCO be stripped of authority from the Fukushima nuclear meltdown site? We got an overwhelming 90% of the voters said, yeah, TEPCO should be stripped of their lives. Okay, they didn't say that, but TEPCO absolutely, positively, unequivocally should be stripped and tarred and feathered and dropped off a mountain or a skyscraper. give them a parachute, like an umbrella or something. Well, let's end the poll. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far. Alien Musk. We haven't heard from Albert for a few days. I hope he's doing okay. I missed Stephen Young last night. Forgot to shout Stephen out. I didn't see his name when we were going through the list. And so we'll double shout him out tonight. Make up for that. John Shiflett. William Sanford. Dana Nasana, thank you for moderating again, Dana. Don Vincent. James Lucid again. James, thank you. I was listening to that call last night. That was awesome, man. You nailed it. Thinker. Good night, everybody. Port Angeles. And everybody out there sitting back watching. Hi, everybody. Just watching this later. Hugs for everybody. Thank you for caring or for trying to understand it. I'm doing my best to make sure everybody can comprehend it. Dale P. And this obsolete optics. And the censorship the last month or so is really stunning, right? Because the nuclear industry doesn't have anybody to pick on. And I'm the only person on the planet doing an anti-nuclear, well, doing a truly nuclear show. And what we do is we covered a lot of news cycles each day, and we try to cover as many lies in each story as we can. But tonight I skipped through a lot of it because you can't keep up with it. You just can't keep up with it. You'd have to do a 7-hour show each day just to keep, and that would be just to say, here's another lie from the last 24 hours. And every single story, multiple, if not dozens of lies. And all we do is try to challenge the lies and show this consistent deceit and deception and dishonesty. And so, yes, TEPCO immediately should be removed. They're a threat to all fauna and flora. Cody, good night, everybody. James Megan. I know Colette's out there somewhere. I talked to Swanee D yesterday morning. I know Richard's out there somewhere. Invisible Rabbit came through. Angel's Place. Nancy Sands, again, another shout out for Stephen Young. I know he's out there. If not now, he'll be there later. Ayers. I will say one thing about you wonderful folks. You're just a great bunch of people. And thank goodness you folks exist. Danny San. If I miss anybody, my apologies. Mr. Dana. Yeah, that guy who calls me, I really dislike what he does. He's a very threatening person a lot of the times. There's Colette. Hi, Colette. Philip Wan. Did I get everybody? Oh, Jesus the model. There you go. I seen you earlier, actually. Because my comments will recycle, right? I won't get all the comments in my management area. It only holds so many comments. So people that commented earlier, I might, and don't comment again, I probably won't see them. Just making sure I got everybody. I think we've done pretty good. Thinker says he's there. I know Richard's lost a few of his cats recently. And so has Swanee D. And that's their family, right? And rightfully so. They're very, very upset and hurt and trying to come to terms with it. My heart goes out to them. Loss is a terrible, terrible, terrible pain. There's no pills can cure it, right? As we all know. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We're going to see everybody. Tomorrow night is the final show, actually, of the week. I checked today, and I was looking at it. I was like, really? It's Wednesday already? What the hell, man? The week is almost gone. It's just shocking. Yeah, thanks, John. Bless your heart. Okay, that's good stuff. Good night, everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hugs for you and your loved ones and your pets and your communities and your insects and your birds and your animals and your hopes and your dreams. We'll see you all tomorrow night. Take care, folks. Yeah, good night, Sharon. Take care, folks. We'll see everybody tomorrow night.